Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Game Podcast. We're super excited to continue having the conversation in Season 3. It's crazy. We're into our third year doing this, Troy. And, that last episode with Madeline I thought was really productive. I thought we really dove into some important conversations with Madeline.
Yeah, no, and I think so, too. We touched a lot about, her view on us and, how we can communicate to get better at getting help for guys and girls who need help. I'm excited for today's episode. It's a great episode again. And talking to someone administrative and getting how we can figure stuff out and relate to it and take another step forward. Yeah, for sure. I mean, this episode we're going to kind of talk a lot about something that I think we really haven't hit on yet, but is definitely important, is the athlete identity. Oftentimes for most of us after college athletics, our career's over, so we're going to kind of talk about that shift of our identity of being an athlete is going to be gone. So we're going to hit with someone who's an alumni here from Minot State who's kind of experienced that. We're going to talk about his road from mental health as an athlete to where he is now within athletics. So I'm excited to kind of hit on those things. With that being said, let's just introduce our guest. Like I said, he's a Minot State baseball alum. We like to call him the director of fun here at Minot State. I guess his formal title is the assistant director for fan development and revenue. Joining us now, Sal Rodriquez.
Yes, thanks for having me, John.
Thanks for being on the show, man. We're super excited to have you here. So let's just jump right into it. We've talked about, coming on the show a couple times. We wanted to get you last week. We had some issues, but you're finally here. Kind of tell us, what is it about mental health and why you wanted to be on the show?
Well, I think mental health has really changed so much since I was an athlete, which wasn't that long ago at all. But then you think about over my playing career and especially where we're at now, it's completely changed. And the awareness of it and what it means to take care of your mental is a lot different. So making the transition from a student athlete to the administrative side of things, now I've seen both sides of working through mental things, and then coaching and working with student athletes that are trying to work through their mental as well. And then also I've done a little coaching too. So I've seen a lot of different aspects and understand a lot of hey, there's different levels to this that, as an athlete you don't necessarily see the coach's side, and as a coach you don't necessarily see the athlete's side. And I think it's just a really unique thing that now it's a big deal, which it should be, and we have the opportunity to really dial things in and make sure that we're all in a really good mental state.
For sure, yeah, I definitely like the different views, and we're going to kind of start right with that. So tell us a little bit, as a baseball player here at Minot State, what were your experiences with mental health?
I would say the biggest challenge that you gentlemen probably understand is balancing everything. You come here to be a student athlete, and a lot of times you put a lot of pressure on yourself to be the next best thing right away. And so when I got here, obviously you're trying to fit in with your teammates, you're trying to do well in class, you're trying to please the coaches, and that takes a lot of strain, but that doesn't include, pressure that you might be getting from your professors when you're traveling so much and you have to tell them, hey, I'm going to miss this test again. Can we work around these assignments? I need help in these classes. There's a really tight balancing act you have to do with that, and then that doesn't account for your social life, like having friends and being able to manage friends and saying hey, I can't go out this weekend for whatever reason. We have practice, we have games. And then also your home life, what are your family, do you have a family situation? Is someone sick? Is there some kind of situation going on there that you have to balance? And for me, we had some stuff where I had relatives that were getting sick, and I was getting homesick, and trying to navigate college away from home for the first time was a little stressful, but at the same time, there's a lot of great resources on campus, and I was lucky to have a lot of good friends and teammates to help make that transition at least a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked in the past on this show about how it's almost like having two full-time jobs. You're a full-time athlete and you're a full-time student, and you have to be successful in the classroom to be able to get on the field to be successful, and it's definitely a tough balance. And you mentioned the professors being hey, you're missing another test, and often I feel like professors sometimes think you're the only class that they have to worry about, they think this COM 100 class is the only thing that matters to you, but you got a full class load of credits.
Yeah, and it's tough to balance it all because they have their job's to teach you. You have your student job, going to class and stuff, and then you have your commitment to sport. So all three of those things to work together takes a lot sometimes, and it's really stressful if you don't know what you're doing or you're new to it, and you gotta learn how to balance it all.
Yeah, balancing act was a good way you put it. I liked that a lot.
I mean, it's definitely a tough thing. And we're not even talking about students that have jobs or internships and things like that. You look at a standard schedule, I would say for any student really, because I think the non-student athlete also has a lot of these same challenges. But I mean, you start adding in work, and when are you going to study, when are you going to work on group projects, and it just becomes a really chaotic schedule for a lot of people. So being there to help each other out and time manage is the most important thing. And I think once you get to college, there's not much before then that teaches you how to effectively time manage. And so you get here, and right away you're thrown into it and said, figure it out. And so I think the biggest thing is if we can all figure out how to time manage effectively, we'd be in a way better place.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we got to not necessarily force, but impart on the freshmen as they first get here, because they're thrown into the fire. It's their first time away from home. They're experiencing, maybe they're, I don't know, 90 miles from home, maybe they're 9 hours from home, and it's definitely not easy. You can't call mom and be like, hey, how do I balance this? Because you're so far away from home.
Yeah, I'd never done my own laundry, so you're trying to figure out all these new things and make friends, and when am I going to have time to eat? That, little things like that end up being big things that add up, and before you know it, like we talk about, mentally you're drained and you don't know what to do.
Yeah, you have that full schedule, as you mentioned. You might be on campus from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then that's your full schedule every day, and then you got to add in, well, maybe we're on the road this week, so that day that you were usually studying all Friday, you're actually on a bus sitting there, and I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty hard to do homework on the bus,
You get distracted pretty easily by the
Yeah.
guys around you.
Yeah, Wi-Fi might be bad.
Yeah, it's not easy. I know that I was never one to really be good at doing assignments on the road. And then once you get to a destination, say you're playing in Duluth, right? You get there late, and at some point you just want to lay down and relax, or you have team meetings, meals, whatever it is, and it does get challenging to find your time to get things done.
Yeah, and then maybe it's a night game in Duluth, and it's a 10-hour drive back home. You get home Sunday morning at 8 a.m., and you get however many hours before you got that 4 p.m. look back and reflect on the game meeting.
And then Sunday night you want to watch a football game instead of your homework, and then it's Monday morning.
Yeah. And baseball, when I was playing, we had, we played Saturday, Sundays, and so you say we're in Upper Iowa on a Sunday and we play a doubleheader. We're not leaving Upper until 3, 4 o'clock, and by the time you get home, it's early in the morning, and you get a couple hours of sleep, and you got to make that decision: am I going to class or am I not going to class? And I think it's really easy to say I'm not going to make it to class, but we all know that's an important piece, especially when you have to work with professors. You want to be there and show that you're putting in the work. So it's definitely a grind, but I think we all understand that it's part of being the student athlete at the same time.
Mm-hmm. No doubt, and I think the biggest thing is just continuing to get that information out there to the people who are getting their first experiences of it, so they understand and they're not blown away and thrown into that fire.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of, it has to be a big part of the recruiting process too.
Mm-hmm.
Like when coaches meet with student athletes, there has to be that level of in order to be successful at this level, you have to have X, Y, and Z things. And we think athleticism for that particular sport. You think you have to have good grades, but also the time management piece, are you going to have the ability to say no to doing certain things so that you can be successful in the classroom, on the playing field, and then also have some sort of social life as well. So I think that needs to be communicated throughout the whole process. And then even the high school coaches say, at the next level, here's what you're going to go through. Because I think a lot of us, high school is completely different than coming here and playing a college level sport, or even some of the athletes that were, at a JUCO or a previous school. It's going to be different when you come to this level or to a new school in general.
For sure. Definitely just doing whatever we can to get all that information out there so that people aren't kind of blown away and feel like they were slapped in the face with all this that they weren't expecting.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, now let's get into kind of your not new role. You've been in the role for about over a year here now, and you're in there in the athletic office, sitting in there with the athletic director and all that. Let's talk about kind of how your views of mental health have changed now that you're in the athletic offices versus on the field.
Yeah, on the field I was so focused and so determined on the task at hand being baseball that there were things going on that I kind of used baseball as my outlet, right? So say something was going on at home for a while there, it was, my grandparents were sick or my uncle was sick, and it was a little tough, but at the same time I'd go to baseball practice and just be that was almost an escape from reality. Anything that was going on, maybe I failed a test, maybe I was struggling with whatever was going on back home, but once we went to baseball, it was strictly baseball practice, which I guess could be a good and bad thing. But then at the same time, there were days where I'm like, man, we just practiced for 3 hours. We had weights, study hall, whatever it may be. And then you get back to the, your residence hall at night, and you're like, man, I'm drained. Like all of it. And there were nights where you weren't getting much sleep. You call home and whatever, but you still have that uneasiness. And so I don't necessarily know if I had the best way of handling my mental as a student athlete. I didn't necessarily go talk to a bunch of people. Every once in a while I had a teammate that I could go talk to, or I would sit down and call my mother, because she always is good for a long conversation like that. But as far as utilizing other resources, and maybe I should have talked to coaches a little bit more than I did, but I always felt, and maybe I had the old school mentality that like you just power through it, right? And now being on the admin side, I think that's maybe not a dangerous place to be, but we got to be careful when we tell people just power through it. It's like injuries, right? The old school mentality is like, oh, if you can play, like go do it. But we know it takes one little thing on an injury and then you're out for a season, right? So I think it could be the same with your mental, where if you don't take good care of it, one little thing ends up putting you way further behind than you could have been if you just took a day to just regroup and think things out. So looking back, I probably would have been a little more mindful of where I was at instead of so zeroed in on just baseball, or school. So maybe that's kind of where I'm at now, is be mindful of the people around us. Like, we're all going through different things. We all have different experiences and different stresses. And if we can all understand where everyone's coming from, I think listening to each other and trying to be supportive of each other is a big step.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important, as you mentioned, with like physical injuries. It's okay to like take a day off practice if you're physically hurt. Like, we see people, you can see the brace on their ankle, or you can see them with the crutches or whatever it may be. But it's a lot harder to like go up to a coach and be like, I'm just not there mentally right now. Like, and we got to find a way to slowly shift the narrative to where it is okay and people feel comfortable having that conversation and telling their coach, like, I'm just not there right now.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for some coaches, and I've been to some conferences where there's coaches that say, I give student athletes free reign, that if you're not feeling it for whatever reason, we can have conversation, but like, you have the right to say, like, I'm not feeling it today, coach, like, can I sit out? And I know a lot of coaches and maybe even some teammates or whatnot feel like that can be an abused system. But I think the more that everyone understands, like, hey, it's okay to be feeling a certain kind of way, and it's okay to take days off, then I think you'll get less abuse of something like that. But at the same time, I think it's something that folks need to be able to chat with the trainers with too, right? Like, the trainers are there just as much mentally as they are physically. So making sure that we have open communication with all the folks that are in our corner to make sure that we are the best version of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and all those things. I mean, that's going to have just as much effect on your performance as we know. Sports is just as much mental. You can be physically out of whack but still perform at a decent level in sport. But as soon as you're in your own head mentally, like, everything else can go out the window.
Definitely. If you're at your peak physical performance but you're not there mentally, it's definitely tough. But then when you get there mentally and you're in a good state, your physical performance shoots through the roof.
It's one of those things too, or like visualization for a lot of people. The mind doesn't know the difference between actually doing it and what your mind's telling it to do. So if you're mentally in it, like, you might not physically be there, like we said, but like, your body's gonna just get it done, right? Where if we're mentally drained and not there, then the body's not going to do it regardless. So.
100%. Yep. All right, let's get into the athlete identity. You were a college athlete, and now you're stepping away. And for a lot of us, sports is all we knew our whole life. And for those seniors who are coming up there, let's talk a little bit about your experiences with that shift as an athlete identity.
I don't know if I've fully made it. Yeah, it's tough. For me, my whole life goal was to be an athlete, right? Whether it was professionally, and then once I realized, maybe professional is a little out of reach, I still wanted to play at some level. My goal was like professional or bust, whether it was, affiliated Major League Baseball or, overseas, whatever it was, my goal was to play. And I got to the point where you start realizing maybe that's not the most realistic option, whether it's ability or it won't pay the bills and all those things you start thinking about. So I kind of saw it coming a little bit, and mentally I'd say I prepared a little bit to be a non-athlete, but still at the same time, you know, so much of your identity comes from being that athlete. Like, you know yourself as, for me, number 21 on a baseball team, or when I played in other places, number 20 on a baseball team. And there's a lot of great things that come with it, you know, like people cheering for you and all that stuff that you don't get when you walk into an office, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'd say I'd miss the things like going up to bat and hearing people cheer your name and all that. Like, no one cheers for me when I walk into an office, right? Like, that's things that you have to get used to. You don't get the traveling on the road with your teammates anymore. And as much as I didn't like it in the moment, like, you miss getting up at 6 a.m. to go hit the weight room with the guys and everything like that. Where once I made the transition and no longer being an athlete, it took a while to say, like, man, I'm not working out. I'm not, you know, eating right. I'm not training hours and hours a day at one particular sport. Like, I've got to figure a lot of things out, and I have way more free time than I knew what to do with. And even now, like, you look at social media, it's such a big thing now. When I was an athlete, all my social media was athletic things. And even now I have troubles with, like, man, like, I want to post so that my family and friends could see what I'm up to, but, like, I'm not an athlete, so what do I post, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so it's a challenge even to this day, where I sit there and I think about being the athlete and all that. But I look back on it, and I'm happy I had those days, and now I get to help y'all with your athletic experience, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the little things that I realized as a player, like, man, I wish someone cared enough to add this cool thing to our game, or maybe the musical playlist that we had when we were playing was so outdated, I wish someone cared enough to update it. Like, things like that, I have the ability to change for you guys so that you have the best experience. And I think I have the ability to live out some of that athletic craving, that competition side of me through, you know, working behind the scenes. And seeing y'all be successful and seeing y'all have a good time is really, like, I know how it feels. So when y'all have fun, I know, like, dang, they're having a good time. Like, I remember that feeling. And so I enjoy having my hands on the back end now and just being around it still.
So for the seniors who are playing in their final games, I mean, odds are you're not playing. Well, for a lot of them, this is the last time they're going to be playing any level of true competitive sport. What is your advice as they transition through that athlete identity? It's
kind of the basic answer, but find something you love to do. And if you really love doing sport, like, find a way to stay in it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, college athletics is not something that typically you make a ton of money doing, but, like, I enjoy being around the sports. I enjoy being around the athletes, and I enjoy hosting events that people have a good time at, and working here gives me the opportunity to do that. So it keeps me around things that I enjoy a lot, where if I was, you know, doing something else, I can't say that I'd be having the same amount of fun. But also, student athletes got to know, like, one day, it's for everybody. If you play at the highest level or you don't, like, there's going to be a day where you don't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. So just realizing that you are a person. What do you like to do? Do you like to golf? Do you like to read? Do you like to write? Like, what is that one thing? And then find a way to do it as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And know that you're more than just the number you wore on a jersey, and you're more than just, you know, going to practices. Like, there's more to life than just the sports that we've done for the past 15, 20 years for most of us. There's a life to live beyond that. So learning, it's a learning process. The same energy that we put into practicing and playing is probably the same energy that we have to put into other passions and learning things. So find that thing and put that same energy that you use as an athlete into it.
Yeah, I definitely like that. I mean, Troy is one of our senior football players who's definitely going through that here soon.
Yeah, excited to golf a little more. I'll tell you what you said. I was like, yeah, I can't wait to do that.
Yes, so, yes. And then you get frustrated with the golf because we're competitive
already
people.
Do that, yeah.
And you want, of course, you want to play on tour, but you're like, hell, I haven't practiced enough. So it's one of those things where you just find something to translate that energy into, and before you know it, you start finding new hobbies and new passions, and it gets better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. Well, before we wrap it up, we want to just offer to you any last thoughts or any last things you want to add before we wrap this one up.
Yeah. I've been telling a lot of athletes, obviously I've worked really closely with the cheer team lately, but being an admin here, it's cool to talk to anybody about any kind of challenge that you're having. Like, feel free to reach out to any of us in the admin office. We're more than happy to sit down and chat with y'all. A lot of us have been in those same places, and the athletes and coaches, so like we're available. There's a lot of really good resources on campus to utilize to make sure that we're all taking care of each other. And at the end of the day, if we need anything, like don't be afraid to find nobody. I think we're all in a space now where, again, like we said, it's cool to talk about these kind of things and help each other out. So don't be afraid, because everyone wants to see us all be healthy physically, mentally, emotionally. We all want to succeed on and off the field and in the classroom. So take care of things that can help you be successful at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's going to conclude this episode of the Mental Game Podcast. We're super excited to continue to change that narrative about mental health awareness and just continue to have those important conversations each and every day. Thank you so much, and roll Beavs.
Go Beavs.
Go Beavs.